2013, a lifetime later, I returned to Iraq, but this time to Erbil, one of the safe cities in the north, rather than to Baghdad, which was still dangerous and chaotic a decade after the U.S.-led invasion. As I had never been to Erbil before, the trip did not feel like a homecoming. I was interested, as a playwright, in finding out more about the Kurdish Syrian refugees who had fled to northern Iraq in the wake of the civil war that had broken out in their country. The first refugee camp I visited was Domis, which is 3 hours' drive from Erbil. Here, the scale of the Syrian disaster became apparent to me. The camp was the size of a town, with tents stretching into the distance. These people had fled horrors I could only imagine. The first wave of refugees had escaped the shelling of their homes by Bashar al-Assad's government forces. The more recent arrivals had survived the onslaught of Islamists who were murdering the Kurds because they were not Muslim enough in their eyes. Another camp I visited a day later, called Kawergost, was newly established and hence much less organized than Domis. Many of the families there were sleeping out in the open under the 40°C sun, desert dust swirling all around them. Some mistook me for a journalist and pleaded with me to tell the world about the long journey on foot that they had undertaken to get to the camp, the people they saw collapsing along the way, their sick children, their desperation for a tent to shield them from the sun. I felt powerless. Everything that my family and I went through paled into insignificance. We were sheltered by money, my parents' education, and our connections abroad. It had struck me that had any of these factors not been in place, had we stayed in Iraq till the first Gulf War, had we experienced the Western-imposed sanctions on the country and the catastrophic collapse in the value of the dinar, we too could have ended up in refugee camps as so many Iraqi families did. Having visited Syria before the war, I knew what the refugees I met were missing, particularly those who had lived in the capital Damascus with its ancient alleyways, picturesque cafes, impressive mosques, and exquisite old houses adorned with water fountains and hidden gardens. They too had fallen out of Eden. They too were having to live on earth. However, their earth was as much more inhospitable place than anything I had experienced. Back in Britain, I felt a renewed sense of gratitude, but also a greater anger towards politicians and some strands of the media who play the fear card and press the buttons that make people suspicious of all the refugees arriving on Europe's shores. The neighboring countries to Syria that have taken in the refugees are under tremendous strain. Their economies and infrastructure are nowhere near as developed as ours. We cannot walk away from this catastrophe. Our house in Baghdad is no longer there. It has been demolished and the garden dug up. In my first play, Baghdad Wedding, I recreated the house with words, complete with rooftop access to the stars. If I ever get the chance to return to Baghdad, it will be to a city I won't recognize. The Baghdad that my family and I knew lives now only in dreams, stories, and the memories we share. The same will be true for many of those who have fled Syria. Whenever I visit my parents' house in New Malden, I feel grateful for the safety, opportunity, and welcome that Britain offered us. The only thing still missing from the house is a dog. Perhaps the RSPCA ban has been lifted, or maybe I've grown up used to the dog-shaped hole in the garden. Anyway, so that's from The Guardian, and it was an extract from A Country of Refuge, an anthology of writing on asylum seekers by Hassan Abdulrazak. And I wanted to read it. It's more about being a refugee than an immigrant, but it's also about being an immigrant. And it's also, I think, really gets at, in a poignant way, some of the different reasons people pick up stakes and just move to some new place. And it shows the humanity of the people that are doing that. yes, they are often very different from us. And so when you see people who are new here and they're coming from some other country and you look at them and you go, oh, whoa, they're different. They're just totally different from us. I don't even know how to talk to somebody like that. And maybe you can't, because maybe they don't even speak the same language. But they speak a human language. They have hearts like yours. They have emotions like yours. They have been through things like you have, and possibly and very likely things that you can't even imagine, because you live where you live, and you exist. You've made your life here, and you've had hard times and good times, but nothing has driven you from your country. And I'm speaking, of course, to people who are not immigrants and refugees at this moment, because if you are, then you know all about that. But to those locals, to those citizens, to those people who've always been here, who grew up here, and who are afraid or concerned, that's who I'm speaking to at the moment. And I'm telling you, you don't understand what these people have been through. Not all of them have seen hard times. This guy's talking about how his journey from Iraq to Britain was, uncomfortable and sort of sad, with a loss of things that he loved, but not all that bad. But when he contrasts it to the journeys other people are taking or stuck in, they're still mid-journey. Remember the last time you took a long trip, and imagine getting like halfway to wherever you're going and then getting stuck there. How would you deal with that? That's with a lot of these refugees. That's the situation they're in. They're just going away from where they're at, and they're stuck wherever they landed or wherever they were stopped on their journey to wherever they imagined they were going. Some of them have a specific destination in mind. Some of them are just going to a place that they've heard of but know nothing about. There's all sorts of different things. But that's what it's like to be a refugee. It's not like some sneaky, weird, awful thing where you're, like conniving. Any conniving that's going on is out of desperation. It's out of need. You have to be conniving. You have to find a place to sleep. You have to find food to eat. And by comparison, being your average immigrant has a pretty cushy situation. They've moved somewhere. They've made a process. They've ended up. They've made a life. And a lot of people who are undocumented still have a hard time, but at least they're somewhere right now, and they're not stuck in a tent or just sleeping out in the dirt at some halfway point without being able to go back or go forward. And that's where refugees are right now. So I don't know. All of this is just a long way around saying, please think of humanity, of the people that you're demonizing or you're worrying about, or you're so stressed about how they're going to change your life. They're human beings. And they need your compassion. Seriously, that's what they need. They need compassion and understanding. They need recognition from one human to another. They need you to look them in the eye and say, I recognize your humanity. I will meet you as a fellow person on this planet. Not, this is my place and I don't know what you're doing here, so I'm looking at you suspiciously. That's not what they need. That will not do anybody any good. So why? Yeah, I don't know. There's so many thoughts going through my head. Like how can I express this so that someone would understand? I don't know. So okay, a lot of the immigrants that we might run across around here in central Illinois are from Mexico. There are a lot of Central Americans here as well, and there are people from Africa. There are people from all over, but probably the majority are from Mexico. So why, for example, would someone come here from Mexico right now? Well, I'll tell you. Here's a story. from the Los Angeles Times, entitled "Violent Clashes Between Police and Teachers Union in Mexico Leave 6 Dead." This is the Teachers Union. Okay, this is not the Revolutionary Front. These aren't people wearing masks and, this is the Teachers Union. Okay? So I'll read this. This is from Oaxaca. Violent clashes between police and members of a radical teachers union who had blockaded roads in southern Mexico on Sunday left 6 people dead and more than 100-ish injured, officials said. The teachers from the National Coordinator of Education Workers, or the CNTE, are opposed to the mandatory testing of teachers as part of Mexico's sweeping education reform and are also protesting the arrest of union leaders on money laundering and other charges. In Sunday's clashes in the southern state of Oaxaca, protesters threw stones and Molotov cocktails and burned vehicles, while Associated Press journalists saw riot police firing on protesters. Clashes took place in several municipalities in Oaxaca, but the most violent were in Nochitlan, north of Oaxaca City, the state capital. Nochitlan, I think is how it's pronounced. I'm not so good with some of that. Anyway, in a late-night news conference, Oaxaca Governor Gabino Cue, announced by federal police, accompanied by Federal Police Chief Enrique Galindo, raised the death toll from the clashes in Nochitlan to 6. They said 53 civilians, 41 federal police agents, and 14 state police agents were injured. Cue said that all the dead were civilians, with 2 having ties to the teachers' union. A state official had previously said a state police officer was killed, but it turned out the person was a civilian. Earlier Sunday, Mexico's federal government released a statement saying 21 federal police had been wounded, 3 of them by gunfire, and that its agents who participated in the operation were not carrying guns. The attack with guns came from people outside the blockades who fired on the population and federal police, it said. I'm not so sure about that. But footage filmed by Associated Press shows at least one police officer firing a gun several times, though it was unclear if he was a federal or state agent. Late Sunday night, Galindo acknowledged that he had sent in some officers with guns after agents came under fire. The police obligation is to protect the population, he said, which is probably why there are 6 civilians dead and no police dead. Anyway, clashes were continuing Sunday night outside Oaxaca City and in the municipalities of San Pablo, Huitzo, and Santiago Guaito. Oh, boy. Sorry. I apologize. Although I am Mexican heritage, I can't necessarily read all Spanish words. This is Santiaguito. Yeah, okay. Santiaguito, sorry. Where protesters had burned federal police installations. Over the last week, unionized teachers have blockaded streets, a shopping mall, and even train tracks in the western state of Michoacan. They have also forced some bus lines to cancel trips to Oaxaca, a popular tourist destination, and blocked the highway on the isthmus of Tehuantepec. I know that. Sorry. And in Oaxaca City, protesting teachers have set up an encampment in the city's main square. Federal prosecutors accused union leaders of setting up an illegal financial network to fund protests and line their own pockets. They alleged the scheme operated in 2013 to 2015 when the union effectively controlled the payroll of Oaxaca's teachers. Following the arrest of some of its top leaders, the union called for a revolt against Mexico's government. 10 years ago, the teachers started a 6-month takeover of Oaxaca that didn't end until police stormed the barricades. So the point of reading that, I mean, that's kind of that differs in many ways from other articles I read earlier today, which I don't have time to look up right now. So I'm going to say that that's probably more the government viewpoint of what's going on there, and it's pretty much slanted against the teachers. I will look for some more balanced reporting and see if what I can come up with and maybe return to this issue. But the main point of reading that was not necessarily to address this issue, which has been ongoing for a while now, and which I am not knowledgeable enough about it to speak intelligently, but to say, in terms of immigrants and refugees, why might you be leaving Mexico to come to the United States? Well, if you lived around here and your loved ones were being killed, or you were just trying to go through life and this stuff was going on around you, you might be inspired to go somewhere else. If those rascals from Urbana decided to invade Champaign for some reason, and you know how they are over there in Urbana, you can't trust them. I mean, you just can't trust them. They're crazy. You just don't even know what they're going to do. But so let's say one day they up and decide to invade Champaign, and they execute a pincer movement, which means they go from two sides around and then to meet in the middle, and they surround Champaign, and we can't get any supplies in, no more pizza, and we're starving. You know what? You might want to move somewhere else. You might say, you know what? Urbana and Champaign, I don't know whose side I'm on, but I know that I don't want to live there anymore because those people they can't settle things peacefully. They burned down the Blind Pig, the WRFU. I used to have a show over there, but now I can't get to Urbana because of the blockade. I just can't live here anymore. I'm moving to Danville. That's it. I'm just moving to Danville. Okay. That's me saying Urbana-Champaign has become intolerable for me. I've got to get out. I've got to go somewhere. Where am I going to go? Well, Danville's pretty close by, about a half an hour away. Actually, I think I'd move to Bloomington or Paxton. Anyway, but the point is, if people in Danville or Bloomington or Paxton saw me as some kind of, like, oh, somebody from Champaign, I can't speak that Champaign dialect. They've got that sound, Champaign, when they talk. It's just weird. I'm treating this in a semi-humorous way, but seriously, that's really what kind of situation a lot of immigrants are in. They just can't live there anymore. The first story that we read about the woman coming from El Salvador, it was just, we could die, very possibly, or we could move somewhere safe. What would you do? You'd move somewhere safe. And what if that somewhere safe said, oh, no, I'm sorry. You have to wait 10 years. You got to fill out all this paperwork, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, I could die tomorrow or the next day. I'm not waiting 10 years. I'm going now. I have to go now. My life depends on it. My children's life depends on it. My family's future depends on me going somewhere right now, not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now, right away. That's what a lot of people are facing. And sure, there are people that come here who are just like, well, I've got a job, and it's a very good one, but I think in America I could probably make a little more money. Yeah, there are people like that coming here, but the vast majority of immigrants are coming here because they really feel like this is the place they need to be. It's not a casual decision. It's not a sort of I guess I could do that kind of decision. It's not like that at all. It's like, this is going to upend my whole life. It's going to change everything for me. I'm going to have to learn a new language. I'm going to have to learn new customs. Everything. I'm starting from scratch. But I really feel the need to do this because of money, because of safety, whatever your reason, because out of desperation maybe. It could be any of those things, but whatever it is a sincere desire to be here. And that's something we should reward, not punish. Don't you think? Don't you want your neighbors to be people that really want to be here? Or would you rather they be people who are like, oh, I hate this place, but, it's all I could afford, so that's where I live. I don't know. I'm running out of persuasive arguments to make, but that's really... let me just read another story. I'm just kind of going around in circles here. But here's what we give them. This is from the alternate.org, entitled Deportation Raids Sweeping the Heartland Are Traumatizing Families. So all these people that really wanted to be here, who worked and struggled and did everything they could to get to a safe place, to get to a place where they could earn a living, to get to a place that they dreamed of, this is what we're doing to them. And this, by the way, is written by an IMC alum named Sarah Lazar. She's been at the IMC. I've met her here. Anyway, this is alternate. Immigrant justice advocates say that the Obama administration's latest wave of deportation raids across the Midwest is traumatizing communities and tearing children from their parents. According to a June 17 statement from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency arrested 331 individuals during a month-long operation in 6 Midwestern states: Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Kansas, Missouri. ICE claimed that the sweeps targeted, quote, criminal aliens and other immigration violators. Richard Wong, field officer for enforcement and removal operations, said, "Our dedicated officers strive to make our community safer by arresting convicted criminal aliens and removing them from the United States." But Christine Newman Ortiz, the executive director of the Wisconsin-based group Voces de la Frontera, responded in a press statement, "ICE claims their raids make communities safer, but in fact ICE makes us all less safe by traumatizing families, robbing children of their parents, and making immigrant community members afraid to cooperate with law enforcement to report crimes." In these raids, ICE arrested the son-in-law of one of our members, and the only offense on his record is a 10-year-old conviction for working with a made-up Social Security number. He is not a threat to anyone. His crime was working to support his wife and 2 children, and he was only arrested because of a racist Arizona-type workplace raid where ICE went to the Star Packaging Factory in Whitewater in 2006 and racially profiled all the Latino workers. Contrary to what ICE claims, he is not a priority for deportation. He is a victim of civil rights violations, and his case should be closed immediately. Bob Label, executive director of the advocacy organization Grassroots Leadership, emphasized in an interview with The Alternate, "I would push back on the idea that targeting people with criminal convictions is the solution. We're talking about the tearing apart of communities and families. If someone has gone through the criminal justice system, then being deported doubly impacts their community and family." The last month of raids comes in the midst of an escalated crackdown primarily targeting migrants and refugees from Central American countries, where U.S. policies have fueled displacement by poverty and violence. According to a recent report from a coalition of immigrant justice organizations known as the Cara Family Detention Pro Bono Project, many of the Central American families swept up in raids this spring and summer were denied their most basic rights to due process and had valid asylum claims. What's more, the report charges that ICE engaged in aggressive and inappropriate conduct during the raids. According to the report, such conduct included forcing women to change clothes in front of ICE officers, and arrests on the way to school and handcuffing of children. President Obama has deported more people than any other president, bringing nearly a 25 50% increase compared to the George W. Bush years. The latest spike has set off fear among the communities targeted, but according to Brenda Perez, organizer with Comité Popular Nashville, the escalation is also inspiring grassroots efforts to protect community safety. Tactics are being used to divide communities, said Perez, but I'm seeing a lot more people who want to know what to do, who want to get organized. A lot more folks are coming forward, asking questions, and getting organized. So that's what we're putting a lot of these people through. Remember Rosario from the first story we read, who came here because her family was targeted by criminals? They had killed one of her family members, and they were making threats to her. That's where she came from, El Salvador. And she and her husband are the targets of a lot of these raids that are taking place right now. We met with ICE. CU Immigration Forum met with ICE to talk about these raids and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And we were informed that, yes, they are indeed prioritizing people with a criminal history, but some of those crimes are very nebulous. Some of them are serious, some of them are not so serious. And they sound, anyway, like they are trying officially to put things in certain categories. But some of those categories are troublesome. For example, DUI. Now that can be a very serious crime. People are killed regularly by drivers under the influence. However, many, many, many regular, ordinary people get at least a DUI at some point in their life. People who drink will sometimes drink just a little more than they think they did, and they drive because they feel like they're perfectly okay. Oh, I'm fine. And they get stopped for some reason, and they get a DUI. They learn an important lesson, and they go, boy, I'm never going to do that again. Well, for most of us, that's where a lot of the DUIs begin and end. For immigrant people, not the case. Often, at least up until we had the undocumented driver's license, non-citizen driver, what is it called? I don't know. There's a name for it. Anyway, the driver's license that undocumented persons can get, a lot of their DUIs were more serious because they also got driving without a license. And so it was compounded. So one thing led to another, and as this person pointed out, some of these convictions are very old. So what happens is we have these directives from above. They sound good. They sound like, oh, only serious crimes, domestic violence, DUI, battery, weapons violations, murder, drugs, whatever these things are. But when you start breaking them down, a lot of them not so much. So the problem is less, I will say, less at the top and more at the bottom. It's more how the agents themselves interpret these things than it is, the rules are kind of set somewhere, and they, at least superficially, they aren't bad. They're like, okay, yeah, serious crimes. DUI can be a serious crime. But the kinds of people that they're getting, they're always, always, always picking the lowest hanging fruit. They used to do this with secure communities. You didn't use your turn signal. Pick you up. Go to jail. Call ICE. You're out of the country. Now with these newer systems that they have in place, they're still doing the same thing, and it's still not being dealt with, or possibly that's kind of the point, to give them some leeway so that they can get this. I don't know, but in any event,